I try again?
Oh yeah, several times you have to do it, and you have to tell.
Distinguished delegates, may I ask you all to please take your seats.
Let's try again, Mr. President. They are now 10 minutes past.
Yes.
Start. If we don't start, I think that's going to continue.
We're 3 minutes past?
If it's 4 minutes past,
4 minutes past. The fourth plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. Before proceeding to the general debate, as announced in the journal, the General Assembly will hear an introduction by the Secretary General of his annual report on the work of the organization, issued as document A/78/1 under agenda item 110 in accordance with resolution 51/241. I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency António Guterres.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, just 9 days ago, many of the world's challenges coalesced in an awful hellscape. Thousands of people in Derna, Libya, lost their lives in epic, unprecedented flooding. They were victims many times over, victims of years of conflict, victims of climate chaos, victims of leaders, near and far, who failed to find a way to peace. The people of Derna lived and died in the epicenter of that indifference, as the skies unleashed 100 times the monthly rainfall in 24 hours, as dams broke after years of war and neglect, as everything they knew was wiped off the map. Even now, as we speak, Bodies are washing ashore from the same Mediterranean Sea where billionaires sunbathe on their super yachts. Derna is a sad snapshot of the state of our world. The flood of inequity, of injustice, of inability to confront the challenges in our midst. Excellencies, our world is becoming unhinged. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Global challenges are mounting. And we seem incapable of coming together to respond. We confront a host of existential threats, from the climate crisis to disruptive technologies, and we do so at a time of chaotic transition. For much of the Cold War, international relations were largely seen through the prism of two superpowers. Then came a short period of unipolarity. Now we are rapidly moving towards a multipolar world. And this is in many ways positive. It brings new opportunities for justice and balance in international relations. But multipolarity alone cannot guarantee peace. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe had numerous powers. It was truly multipolar, but it lacked robust multilateral institutions, and the result was World War I. A multipolar world needs strong and effective multilateral institutions. Yet, global governance is stuck in time. Look no further than the United Nations Security Council and the Bretton Woods system. They reflect the political and economic realities of 1945, when many countries in this assembly hall were still under colonial domination. The world has changed. Our institutions have not. We cannot effectively address problems as they are if institutions do not reflect the world as it is. Instead of solving problems, they risk becoming part of the problem. And indeed, divides are deepening. Divides among economic and military powers, divides between North and South, East and West. We are inching ever closer to a great fracture in economic and financial systems and trade relations, one that threatens a single open internet with diverging strategies on technology and artificial intelligence and potentially clashing security frameworks. It is high time to renew multilateral institutions based on 21st century economic and political realities rooted in equity, solidarity, and universality, and anchored in the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. That means reforming the Security Council in line with the world of today. It means redesigning the international financial architecture so that it becomes truly universal and serves as a global safety net for developing countries in trouble. I have no illusions. Reforms are a question of power. And I know there are many competing interests and agendas, but the alternative to reform is not the status quo. The alternative to reform is further fragmentation. It is reform or rupture. At the same time, divides are also widening within countries. Democracy is under threat. Authoritarianism is on the march. Inequalities are growing, and hate speech is on the rise. In the face of all these challenges and more, compromise has become a dirty word. Our world needs statesmanship, not gamesmanship and gridlock. As I told in the G20, it is time for a global compromise. Politics is compromise. Diplomacy is compromise. Effective leadership is compromise. Leaders have a social responsibility to achieve compromise in building a common future of peace and prosperity for our common good. Excellencies, over the past year, we have shown the promise of multilateral action. With important new agreements on safeguarding biodiversity, on protecting the high seas, on climate loss and damage, on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. We have all the tools and resources to solve our shared challenges. What we need is determination. And determination is in the DNA of our United Nations summoning us with the first words of the Charter. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to end the scourge of war, determined to reaffirm faith in human rights, determined to uphold justice and respect international law, and determined to promote social progress and better lives for all people. It falls to us, through our actions, to apply that determination to the challenges of today, being faithful to the Charter of the United Nations. Excellencies, it starts with determination to uphold the Charter's pledge for peace. Yet, instead of ending the scourge of war, we are seeing a surge of conflicts, coups, and chaos. If every country fulfilled its obligations under the Charter, the right to peace would be guaranteed. When countries break those pledges, they create a world of insecurity for everyone. Exhibit A, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war, in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law, has unleashed a nexus of horror. Lives destroyed, human rights abused, families torn apart, children traumatized, hopes and dreams shattered. But beyond Ukraine, the war has serious implications for us all. Nuclear threats put us all at risk. Ignoring global treaties and conventions makes us all less safe. And the poisoning of global diplomacy obstructs progress across the board. We must not relent in working for peace, a just peace in line with UN Charter and international law. And even while fighting rages, we must pursue every avenue to ease the suffering of civilians in Ukraine and beyond. The Black Sea Initiative was one such avenue. The world badly needs Ukrainian food and Russian food and fertilizers to stabilize markets and guarantee food security. And I will not give up on my efforts to make it happen. Excellencies, around the globe, old tensions fester while new risks emerge. Nuclear disarmament is at a standstill while countries develop new weapons and make new threats. Across the Sahel, a series of coups is further destabilizing the region as terrorism is gaining ground. Sudan is descending into full-scale civil war. Millions have fled, and the country risks splitting apart. In Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, millions are displaced, and gender-based violence is a horrific daily reality. In Haiti, a country that suffered centuries of colonial exploitation is today overwhelmed by gang violence and still awaits international support. In Afghanistan, a staggering 70% of the population needs humanitarian assistance, with the rights of women and girls systematically denied. In Myanmar, brutal violence, worsening poverty, and repression are crushing hopes for a return to democracy. In the Middle East, escalating violence and bloodshed in the occupied Palestinian territory is taking a terrible toll on civilians. Unilateral actions are intensifying and undermining the possibility of a two-state solution, the only pathway to lasting peace and security for Palestinians and Israelis. Syria remains in ruins, while peace remains remote. And meanwhile, natural disasters are worsening the man-made disaster of conflict. In the face of this mounting crisis, the global humanitarian system is on the verge of collapse. Needs are rising, and funding is drying up. Our humanitarian operations are being forced to make massive cuts. But if we don't feed the hungry, we are feeding conflict. And I urge all countries to step up and to fund fully our global humanitarian appeal. Excellencies, the peace and security architecture is under unprecedented strain. That is why, in the context of the preparations for the Summit of the Future, we put forward ideas for the consideration of member states for a new agenda for peace based on the Charter and international law. It provides a unifying vision to address existing and new threats for a world in transition. calling on states to recommit to hold free from nuclear weapons and to end the erosion of the nuclear disarmament and arms control regime. Bolstering prevention at the global level by maximizing the capacity and convening power of the UN and our good offices to bridge geopolitical divides. Bolstering prevention at the national level by linking actions for peace with progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Putting women's leadership and participation at the center of decision-making and committing to the eradication of all forms of violence against women. Calling for a broad-based reflection on peacekeeping and make it nimbler and more adaptable with forward-looking transition and exit strategies from the start. And supporting peace enforcement action by regional organizations, notably the African Union, with Security Council clear mandates and predictable funding. Determination for peace also requires new governance frameworks for emerging threats, from artificial intelligence to little autonomous weapons that function without human control. Excellencies, peace is inextricably linked to sustainable development. We see a familiar pattern around the world. The closer a country is to conflict, the further is far from the Sustainable Development Goals. The Charter calls on us to be determined in promoting social progress. In 21st century terms, that means achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Yet inequality defines our time. From cities where skyscrapers tower over slums, to countries that are forced to choose between serving their people or serving their debts. Today, Africa spends more on debt interest than on healthcare. Yesterday's SDG summit was about a global rescue plan to scale up support from billions to trillions. And excellencies, the international financial architecture remains dysfunctional, outdated, and unjust. And the deep reforms that are needed won't happen overnight, but we can take determined steps now to help countries where the crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic have dramatically impacted. By urgently advancing the SDG stimulus of $500 billion per year and relieving the financial burden on developing and emerging economies. By scaling up development and climate finance, increasing the capital base and changing the business model of multilateral development banks, by ensuring effective debt relief mechanisms and channeling emergency financial support towards those in greatest needs. Excellencies, we must be determined to tackle the most immediate threat to our future, our overheating planet. Climate change is not just a change in the weather. Climate change is changing life on our planet. It is affecting every aspect of our work. It is killing people and devastating communities. Around the world, we see not only accelerating temperatures, we see an acceleration in sea levels rising, glaciers receding, deadly diseases spreading, the extinction of species and cities under threat. And this is only the beginning. We have just survived the hottest days, the hottest months, and the hottest summer on the books. Behind every broken record are broken economies, broken lives, and whole nations at the breaking point. Every continent, every region, and every country is feeling the heat. But I'm not sure all leaders are feeling that heat. Actions are falling abysmally short. There is still time to keep rising temperatures within the 1.5-degree limits of the Paris Agreement, but that requires drastic steps now to cut greenhouse gas emissions and to ensure climate justice for those who did least to cause the crisis but are paying the highest price. We have the receipts. G20 countries are responsible for 80% of greenhouse emissions. They must lead. They must break their addiction to fossil fuels, stop new coal, and the International Energy Agency's findings that new oil and gas licensing by them is incompatible with keeping the 1.5-degree limit alive. To stand a fighting chance of limiting global temperature rise, we must phase out coal, oil, and gas in a fair and equitable way and massively boost renewables. This is the only path to affordable, renewable energy for all. And unfortunately, many still in Africa, mainly in Africa, still lack electricity. So the fossil fuel age has failed. If fossil fuel companies want to be part of the solution, they must lead the transition to renewable energy. No more dirty production. No more fake solutions. No more bankrolling climate denial. I have laid out the Climate Solidarity Pact, in which all big emitters are asked to make extra efforts to cut emissions, and wealthier countries support emerging economies with finance and technology to do so. For example, Africa has 60% of the world's solar capacity, but just 2% of renewable investments. And I've also put forward an acceleration agenda to supercharge these efforts. Developed countries must reach net zero as close as possible to 2040, and emerging economies as close as possible to 2050, in line with common but differentiated responsibilities. And immediate steps include an end to coal by 2030 for OECD countries and 2040 for the rest of the world. An end to fossil fuel subsidies and the price on carbon. Developed countries must also finally deliver the $100 billion for developing country climate action as promised, double adaptation finance by 2025 as promised, and replenish the Green Climate Fund as promised. And all countries must work to operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund this year and ensure universal early warning coverage by 2027. Tomorrow, I will welcome credible first movers and doers to our Climate Ambition Summit. And COP28 is around the corner. Climate chaos is breaking new records, but we cannot afford the same old broken record of scapegoating and waiting for others to move first. And to all those working, marching, and championing real climate action, I want you to know that you are on the right side of history and that I am with you. I won't give up this fight of our lives. Excellence.
Excellencies.
Nous devons
We must also be determined to honour the Charter's commitment to fundamental human rights. Just 4 women signed our founding document. One look around this room shows that not enough has changed. We the peoples does not mean we the men. Women are still waiting for equal opportunities and equal pay. Women are still waiting for equal opportunities and equal pay, for equality under the law, for their work to be valued and their opinions to count. Around the globe, women's rights, including sexual and reproductive rights, are being suppressed and even rolled back, and women's freedoms curtailed. In some countries, women and girls are punished for wearing too many clothes. In others, for wearing too few. Thanks to generations of women's rights activists, times are changing. From sports field to schools and public squares, girls and women are challenging the patriarchy and winning. I stand with them. I entered this office with a commitment to ensure gender parity at the UN. We have achieved that at senior levels and are on track to do so across the UN system. Because gender equality is not the problem. Gender equality is the solution. It is not a favor to women. It is a fundamental condition to ensuring a better future for all. Excellencies, we must be determined to answer the call to action to put human rights at the heart of our work. 75 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there has been enormous progress in some areas, from ending colonization and segregation, to ensuring women's voting rights. But we have not achieved basic rights for all. When 1.2 billion people still live in acute poverty and hunger is at levels not seen since 2005. When discrimination on racial and ethnic grounds is perfectly legal in many countries. When people must risk death to seek a better life. When refugees, migrants, and minorities are routinely demonized and hounded. When declaring your gender identity or simply who you love can lead to imprisonment or even execution. When speaking out can lead to perilous consequences. Human rights, political, civil, economic, social, and cultural, are the key to solving many of the world's interlinked problems. Laws to protect the vulnerable must be enacted and enforced. The targeting of minorities must stop, and human rights and human dignity must be at the center of social, economic, and migration policies. All governments must fulfill the commitment they made in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Excelências,
Excellencies, we must also face up to the looming threats posed to human rights by new technologies. Generative artificial intelligence holds much promise, but it may also lead us across a Rubicon and into more danger than we can control. When I mentioned artificial intelligence in my General Assembly speech in 2017, only 2 other leaders even uttered the term. Now AI is on everyone's lips, a subject of both awe and fear. Even some of those who developed generative AI are calling for greater regulation. But many of the dangers of digital technology are not looming on the horizon, they are here. The digital divide is inflaming inequalities. Hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories on social media platforms are spread and amplified by AI, undermining democracy and fueling violence and conflict in real life. Online surveillance and data harvesting are enabling human rights abuses on a mass scale. And technology companies and governments are far from finding solutions.
we must move fast and mend things. New technologies require new innovative forms of governance, with input from experts building this technology and from those monitoring its abuses. And we urgently need a global digital compact between governments, regional organizations, the private sector, and civil society to mitigate the risks of digital technologies and identify ways to harness their benefits for the good of humanity. Some have called for consideration of a new global entity on AI that could provide a source of information and expertise for member states. There are many different models, inspired by such examples as the International Atomic Energy Agency, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the UN stands ready to host the global and inclusive discussions that are needed, depending on the decisions of member states. To help advance the search for concrete governance solutions, I will appoint this month a high-level advisory body on artificial intelligence, which will provide recommendations by the end of this year. And next year's Summit of the Future is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for progress to deal with these new threats in line with the vision of the UN Charter. Member states will decide how to move forward on the new agenda for peace, the Global Digital Compact, reforms to the international financial architecture, and many other proposals to address challenges and bring greater justice and equity to global governance. Excellencies, the United Nations was created precisely for moments like these, moments of maximum danger and minimum agreement. We can and must use our tools in flexible and creative ways. Last month, we saw the dividends of determination off the coast of Yemen. Carrying 1 million barrels of oil the decaying FSO Safar supertanker was a ticking time bomb, a looming ecological disaster in the Red Sea. But no one offered to solve the problem. So the United Nations stepped in and brought the world together. We mobilized resources, assembled the experts, navigated difficult negotiations, and built trust. We have more work ahead and more resources are needed. But last month, the oil was successfully transferred from the Safar. This UN-led action saved the Red Sea. When no one else could or would, UN determination got the job done. Despite our long list of global challenges, that same spirit of determination can guide us forward. Let us be determined to heal divisions and forge peace, determined to uphold the dignity and worth of every person, determined to realize the Sustainable Development Goals and effectively leave no one behind, determined to reform multilateralism for the 21st century and come together for the common good. And I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 8, entitled General Debate. Excellencies, heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, and all stakeholders here present. Good morning. It is my honor and privilege as President of the United Nations General Assembly to welcome you to this hall for the opening of the general debate of the 78th session. Allow me to acknowledge in our midst today several presidents, former presidents of the General Assembly, including His Excellency Han Sang-soo, former Prime Minister of Korea, who served as president of the 56th session of the Assembly, and who now sits as chair of the UN Council of Former Presidents of the General Assembly. Together, this Assembly Hall and this rostrum stand as a living testament to multilateralism and to the extraordinary role and compelling influence of the United Nations over the 75 years of its existence. It is a unique and truly global platform for debate, dialogue, and problem solving through multilateral diplomacy. This year, our imperative is clear: to unite the nations, to be united in conviction of common purpose and in solidarity of joint action. Excellencies, such a common coordinated approach is needed now as much as at any point in our history. War, climate change, debt, energy and food crises, poverty and famine. These crises are directly impacting the lives and well-being of billions of people around the world. They are rolling back decades of hard-won development gains and thus condemning millions to lifelong intergenerational poverty and hardship. It is at times like these that we must search deep within to find our better selves and our common humanity that impels us to meet the moment. I therefore implore you, let us use this forum for that which it was intended. Let us listen and learn. Let us rebuild trust and reignite global solidarity. And let us find common ground to address the challenges we face. In the words of the late, great Madeleine Albright, if the UN did not exist, we would have to invent it. We are fortunate, therefore, that it does indeed exist. Let us therefore make full and effective use of this unparalleled resource. Excellencies, this message is all the more important in light of the continued violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of a fellow member of the United Nations, Ukraine. That horrendous war has unleashed untold suffering and destroyed countless families, communities, and lives. Its cascading impacts has also spooked many developing countries in far-flung corners of the globe, unleashing acute shortages of essential commodities, triggering food insecurity and volatility in energy prices. It has even revived the unconscionable threat of nuclear war. We all want this war to end. It is an affront to everything that this organization and the UN Charter stands for. We need just and sustainable peace in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, in line with international law and with the UN Charter. Peace must also be given a chance in other parts of the globe, from Africa to the Middle East. With the adoption of the Agenda 2063, Africa spelled a clear path for the Africa we want, and the continent still has a great chance to cut a corner in consolidating democracy and good governance. But the resurgence of coups in Africa is a regressive step, and the root causes of such alarming trends must be carefully analyzed and addressed. I urge you, member states, to use this high-level week not to fan the flames of conflict and hostility, but instead to opt for dialogue and diplomacy. We must remember that peace is an investment in our collective prosperity. I call on leaders to come together, to abide by the Charter, and support efforts to deliver a peaceful resolution to the war. Excellencies, yesterday we began our high-level week with the SDG Summit. It offered a prime moment to take stock of our successes and failures in delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Front and center with the fact that 1.2 billion people are living in multidimensional poverty as of 2022. While some progress has been made on the goals, the summit is being convened in a context where there have been unacceptable delays and rollbacks. Let me be clear, we do not have the luxury of excuses, nor are we absolved of our responsibilities. The onus is on us, collectively, to make up for the lost momentum and work much harder in the remaining 7 years to accelerate progress on that which we have promised to deliver. The commitment to action presented at the summit should therefore be the tailwind to regain lost ground and supercharge implementation. Excellencies, the SDG Summit was only the start of what is a full agenda during High-Level Week. It naturally interlinks with the General Assembly's high-level dialogue on financing for development, which is key to accelerating the financing impetus for the SDGs. The preparatory ministerial meeting for the Summit of the Future will help to launch the negotiations of the Pact of the Future. giving guidance on how to ensure that the United Nations is fit for purpose in the 21st century. It will give member states the opportunity to come together and to transform our shared future. We will also see 3 health-related high-level meetings on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, universal health coverage, and on tuberculosis, all of which offer us opportunities to better the lives of our global citizens. And the Secretary General's Climate Action Summit offers a moment to build political ambition ahead of COP28 in November. Tomorrow, I will also join hands with several heads of state and government to convene a breakfast summit to address the existential threats posed by sea level rise, an issue of significant concern to small island developing states, especially those in the Pacific region. Excellencies, allow me to pause here and to reiterate my deepest condolences to the governments and people of Morocco and Libya. The twin disasters of earthquakes and flooding have left thousands dead and untold more suffering. It is my sincere hope that resources and relief can be expedited in desperate need. As a citizen of a climate vulnerable region, I urge member states to recognize the continued and escalating impacts of climate change and to deliver real transformative results. Let us work together to unlock the finances and resources required to support those most vulnerable in mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building. And let us continue to work on the multidimensional vulnerability index with the aim of moving beyond GDP to a measure of economic development that effectively captures a country's true vulnerability to external shocks. Excellencies, beyond the high-level week, this year we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to the principles enshrined in the Declaration and to remind ourselves that we are all born free and equal in dignity and in rights. As President of the 78th session, I am committed to championing vulnerable and marginalized groups, including indigenous peoples, peoples living with disabilities, and older persons. I have committed to ensure that we do not continue to neglect countries in special situations, and I intend to soon launch the high-level advisory group on LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. But first and foremost, we need to work for all women and girls who are appallingly still struggling for equality and respect. We must walk the talk on gender equality and women's empowerment. This means according women full, equal, and meaningful participation at every level. As an international gender champion myself, I'm strongly committed to promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. And I have appointed a special envoy and special advisor on gender equality and women's empowerment to assist me in this endeavor. Before I close, allow me to emphasize this. Despite the many and complex challenges we face, we do have the capacity to effect change. consequential change. We can make a meaningful difference to the lives of billions of people if we so choose. We do not lack capacity. What we lack is the will to act. By putting aside our differences and bridging divides, we can deliver, we must deliver peace, progress, prosperity, and sustainability to everyone, everywhere. So let us step up and take action now. Let us re-energize the UN General Assembly and demonstrate our capacity and our will to deliver for all. In the words of Stephen Pressfield, an author born in Trinidad and Tobago, the most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it can become a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed. Never forget, this very moment, we can change our lives. There never was a moment, and never will be, when we are without the power to alter our destiny. This second, we can turn the tables on resistance. This second, we can sit down and do our work. Excellencies, I thank you once again for your support to me and my presidency, and I wish you fruitful, productive, and healthy debate in the coming days. I thank you. Thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into the other official UN languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA 200, located behind the rostrum, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
embaixador Denis Francis de Trinidad, Tobago. É uma satisfação ser antecedido pelo Secretário-Geral das Nações Unidas, António Guterres. Saúdo cada um dos chefes de Estado, de governo e delegadas e delegados aqui presentes. Presto minha homenagem ao nosso compatriota Sérgio Vieira de Mello e 21 outros funcionários desta organização, vítimas brutal do atentado em Bagdá há 20 anos atrás. Desejo igualmente expressar minhas condolências às vítimas do terremoto no Marrocos e das tempestades que atingiram a Líbia. A exemplo do que ocorreu recentemente no estado do Rio Grande do Sul, no meu país, estas tragédias ceifam vidas e causam perdas irreparáveis. Nossos pensamentos de orações estão com todas as vítimas e seus familiares. Senhoras e senhores, há 20 anos ocupei essa tribuna pela primeira vez e disse daquele 23 de setembro de 2003 que minhas primeiras palavras diante deste Parlamento Mundial sejam de confiança na capacidade humana de vencer desafios e evoluir para formas superiores de convivência. Volto hoje para dizer que mantenho minha inabalável confiança na humanidade. Naquela época, o mundo ainda não havia se dado conta da gravidade da crise climática. Hoje, ela bate às nossas portas, destrói nossas casas, nossas cidades, nossos países, mata e impõe perdas e sofrimentos a nossos irmãos, sobretudo aos mais pobres. A fome, tema central da minha fala neste Parlamento Mundial 20 anos atrás, atinge hoje 735 milhões de seres humanos que vão dormir esta noite sem saber se terão o que comer amanhã. O mundo está cada vez mais desigual. Os 10 maiores bilionários possuem mais riqueza que os 40% mais pobres da humanidade. O destino de cada criança que nasce nesse planeta parece traçado ainda no ventre de sua mãe. A parte do mundo em que vivem seus pais e a classe social a qual pertence sua família irão determinar se essa criança terá ou não oportunidades ao longo da vida. Fazer todas as refeições, você terá negado o direito de tomar café de manhã, almoçar e jantar diariamente. Se terá acesso à saúde ou se irá sucumbir a doenças que já podiam ter sido erradicadas. Se completará os estudos e conseguirá o emprego de qualidade ou se fará parte da legião de desempregados, subempregados e desalentados que não para de crescer. É preciso, antes de tudo, vencer a resignação que nos faz aceitar tamanha injustiça como fenômeno natural. Para vencer a desigualdade, falta vontade política daqueles que governam o mundo. Senhoras e senhores, se hoje eu retorno na honrosa condição de presidente do Brasil, é graças à vitória da democracia em meu país. A democracia garantiu que superássemos o ódio, a desinformação e a opressão. A esperança, mais uma vez, venceu o medo. Nossa missão é unir o Brasil e reconstruir um país soberano, justo, sustentável, solidário, generoso e alegre. O Brasil está se reencontrando consigo mesmo, com nossa região, com o mundo e com o multilateralismo. Como não me canso de repetir, o Brasil está de volta. Nosso país está de volta para dar sua devida contribuição ao enfrentamento Nosso país está de volta para dar a sua devida contribuição ao enfrentamento dos principais desafios globais. Resgatamos o universalismo da nossa política externa, marcada por diálogo respeitoso com todos. A comunidade internacional está mergulhada em um turbilhão de crises múltiplas e simultâneas. A pandemia da Covid-19, crise climática e a insegurança alimentar e energética ampliada por crescentes tensões geopolíticas. O racismo, a intolerância e a xenofobia se alastram, ativadas por novas tecnologias criadas supostamente para nos aproximar. Se tivéssemos que resumir em uma única palavra este desafio, ela seria desigualdade. A desigualdade está na raiz desses fenômenos ou atua para agravá-los. A mais ampla e mais ambiciosa ação coletiva da ONU, voltada para o desenvolvimento, a Agenda 2030, pode se transformar no seu maior fracasso. Estamos na metade do período de implantação e ainda muito distante das metas definidas. A maior parte dos objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável caminha em ritmo muito lento. O imperativo moral e político de erradicar a pobreza e acabar com a fome parece estar anestesiado. Nesses 7 anos que nos restam, a redução da desigualdade dentro dos países e entre eles deveria se tornar o objetivo síntese da Agenda 2030. Reduzir as desigualdades dentro dos países requer incluir os pobres nos orçamentos nacionais e fazer os ricos pagar impostos proporcionais ao seu patrimônio. No Brasil, estamos comprometidos a implementar todos os 17 Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável de maneira integrada e indivisível. Queremos alcançar a igualdade racial na sociedade brasileira por meio de um 18º objetivo que adotaremos voluntariamente. Lançamos o Plano Brasil Sem Fome, que vai reunir uma série de iniciativas para reduzir a pobreza e a insegurança alimentar. Entre elas está o Bolsa Família, que se tornou referência mundial em programa de transferência de renda para famílias que mantêm suas crianças vacinadas e na escola. Inspirados na brasileira Berta Lutz, pioneira na defesa da igualdade de gênero na Carta da ONU, aprovamos a lei que torna obrigatória a igualdade salarial entre mulheres e homens no exercício da mesma função. Combateremos o feminicídio e todas as formas de violência contra as mulheres. Seremos rigorosos na defesa dos direitos dos grupos LGBTQI+, e pessoas com deficiência. Resgatamos a participação social como ferramenta estratégica para a execução de políticas públicas. Senhor Presidente, agir contra a mudança do clima implica pensar no amanhã e enfrentar as desigualdades históricas. Os países ricos cresceram baseado em um modelo com alta taxa de emissão de gases danosos ao clima. A emergência climática torna urgente uma correção de rumos e a implantação do que já foi acordado. Não é por outra razão que falamos em responsabilidades comuns, mas diferenciadas. São as populações vulneráveis do Sul Global as mais afetadas pelas perdas de danos causados pela mudança do clima. Os 10% mais ricos da população mundial são responsáveis por quase a metade de todo o carbono lançado na atmosfera. Nós, países em desenvolvimento, não queremos repetir esse modelo. No Brasil, já provamos uma vez e vamos provar de novo que um modelo socialmente justo e ambientalmente sustentável é possível. Estamos na vanguarda da transição energética. Nossa matriz já é uma das mais limpas do mundo. 87% da nossa energia elétrica provém de fontes limpas e renováveis. A geração de energia solar, eólica, biomassa, etanol, biodiesel cresce a cada ano. É enorme o potencial de redução de hidrogênio verde. Com o plano de transformação ecológica, apostaremos na industrialização e infraestruturas sustentáveis. Retomamos uma robusta e renovada agenda amazônica com ações de fiscalização e combate a crimes ambientais. Ao longo dos últimos 8 meses, o desmatamento na Amazônia brasileira já foi reduzido em 48%. O mundo inteiro sempre falou da Amazônia. O mundo inteiro sempre falou da Amazônia. Agora é a Amazônia que está falando por si mesma. Sediamos há um mês a cúpula de Belém no coração da Amazônia e lançamos uma nova agenda de colaboração entre os países que fazem parte daquele bioma. Somos 50 milhões de sul-americanos, amazônidas, cujo futuro depende da ação decisiva e coordenada dos países que detêm soberania sobre os territórios da região. Também aprofundamos o diálogo com outros países detentores de florestas tropicais da África e da Ásia. Queremos chegar à COP28 em Dubai, com uma visão conjunta que reflita sem qualquer tutela as prioridades de preservação das bacias amazônicas do Congo e do Bornéu-Mekong, a partir das nossas próprias necessidades. Sem mobilização de recursos financeiros e tecnológicos, não há como implementar o que decidimos no Acordo de Paris e no Marco Global da Biodiversidade. A promessa de destinar 100 bilhões de dólares anualmente para os países em desenvolvimento permanece apenas isso, uma longa promessa. Hoje, este valor seria insuficiente para uma demanda que já chega à casa dos trilhões de dólares. Senhor Presidente, o princípio sobre o qual se assenta o multilateralismo, o da igualdade soberana entre as nações, vem sendo corroído. Nas principais instâncias da governança global, negociações em que todos os países têm voz e voto perderam o fôlego. Quando as instituições reproduzem as desigualdades, elas fazem parte do problema e não da solução. No ano passado, o FMI disponibilizou 160 bilhões de dólares em direitos especiais de saque para países europeus e apenas 34 bilhões para os países africanos. A representação desigual e distorcida na direção do FMI e do Banco Mundial é inaceitável. Não corrigimos os excessos da desregulação dos mercados e da apologia do Estado mínimo. As bases de uma nova governança econômica não foram lançadas. Os BRICS surgiu na esteira desse mobilismo e constitui uma plataforma estratégica para promover a cooperação entre países emergentes. A ampliação recente do grupo na cúpula de Joanesburgo fortalece a luta por uma ordem que acomoda a pluralidade econômica, geográfica e política do século XXI. Somos uma força que trabalha em prol de um comércio global mais justo, num contexto de grave crise do multilateralismo. O protecionismo dos países ricos ganhou força e a Organização Mundial do Comércio permanece paralisada, em especial o seu sistema de solução de controvérsias. Ninguém mais se recorda da rodada do desenvolvimento de Doha. Nesse íntere, o desemprego e a precarização do trabalho minaram a confiança das pessoas em tempos melhores, em especial os jovens do mundo. Os governos precisam romper com a dissonância cada vez maior entre a voz do mercado e a voz das ruas. O neoliberalismo agravou a desigualdade econômica e política que hoje assola as democracias. Seu legado é uma massa de deserdados e excluídos. Em meio aos seus escombros, surgem aventureiros de extrema-direita que negam a política e vendem soluções tão fáceis quanto equivocadas. Muitos sucumbiram à tentação de substituir um neoliberalismo falido por um nacionalismo primitivo, conservador e autoritário. Repudiamos uma agenda que utiliza os imigrantes como bodes expiatórios, que corrói o estado de bem-estar e que investe contra o direito dos trabalhadores. Precisamos resgatar as melhores tradições humanistas que inspiraram a criação da ONU. Políticas ativas de inclusão nos planos cultural, educacional e digital são essenciais para a promoção dos valores democráticos e da defesa do Estado de Direito. É fundamental preservar a liberdade de imprensa. Um jornalista como Julian Assange não pode ser punido por informar a sociedade de maneira transparente e legítima. Nossa luta é contra a desinformação e os crimes cibernéticos. Aplicativos e plataformas não devem abolir as leis trabalhistas pelas quais tanto lutamos. Ao assumir a presidenta do G20 em dezembro próximo, não mediremos esforços para colocar no centro da agenda internacional o combate às desigualdades e todas as suas dimensões. Sob o lema Construindo um Mundo Justo e um Planeta Sustentável, a presidência brasileira vai articular inclusão social e combate à fome, desenvolvimento sustentável e reforma das instituições de governança global. Senhor presidente, não haverá sustentabilidade nem prosperidade sem paz. Os conflitos armados são uma afronta à racionalidade humana. Conhecemos os horrores e os sofrimentos produzidos por todas as guerras. A promoção de uma cultura de paz é um dever de todos nós construí-la e requer persistência e vigilância. É perturbador ver que persistem as antigas disputas não resolvidas e que surgem ou ganham vigor novas ameaças. Bem mostra a dificuldade de garantir a criação de um Estado do povo palestino. A este caso se somam a persistência da crise humanitária no Haiti, o conflito no Iêmen, as ameaças à unidade nacional na Líbia e as rupturas institucionais em Burkina Faso, Gabão, Guiné-Conakry, Mali, Níger e Sudão. Na Guatemala, há risco de um golpe que impediria a posse do vencedor das eleições democráticas. A guerra na Ucrânia escancara a nossa incapacidade coletiva de fazer prevalecer os propósitos e princípios da Carta da ONU. Não subestimamos as dificuldades para alcançar a paz, mas nenhuma solução será duradoura se não for baseada no diálogo. Tenho reiterado que é preciso trabalhar para criar espaço para negociações. Investe-se muito em armamentos e pouco em desenvolvimento. No ano passado, os gastos militares somaram mais de 2,224 bilhões de dólares. As despesas com armas nucleares chegaram a 83 bilhões de dólares, valor 20 vezes superior ao orçamento regular da ONU. Estabilidade e segurança não serão alcançadas onde há exclusão social e desigualdade. A ONU nasceu para ser a casa do entendimento e do diálogo. A comunidade internacional precisa escolher. De um lado, está a ampliação dos conflitos, o aprofundamento das desigualdades e a erosão do Estado de Direito. Do outro, a renovação das instituições multilaterais dedicadas à promoção da paz. As sanções unilaterais causam grande prejuízo à população dos países afetados. Além de não alcançarem seus alegados objetivos, dificultam os processos de mediação, prevenção e resolução pacífica de conflitos. O Brasil seguirá denunciando medidas tomadas sem amparo na Carta da ONU, como o embargo econômico e financeiro imposto a Cuba e a tentativa de classificar esse país como Estado patrocinador do terrorismo. Continuaremos críticos a toda tentativa de dividir o mundo em zona de influência e de reeditar a Guerra Fria. O Conselho de Segurança da ONU vem perdendo progressivamente a sua credibilidade. Essa fragilidade decorre, em particular, da ação de seus membros permanentes, que travam guerras não autorizadas em busca de expansão territorial ou de mudança de regime. Esta paralisia é a prova mais eloquente da necessidade e urgência de reformá-lo, conferindo-lhe maior representatividade e eficácia. Senhoras e senhores, a desigualdade precisa inspirar indignação. Indignação com a fome, a pobreza, a guerra, o desrespeito ao ser humano. Somente movidos pela força da indignação, poderemos agir com vontade e determinação para vencer a desigualdade e transformar efetivamente o mundo ao nosso redor. A ONU precisa cumprir seu papel de construtora de um mundo mais justo, solidário e fraterno. Mas só o fará se seus membros tiverem a coragem de proclamar sua indignação com a desigualdade e trabalhar incansavelmente para superá-la. Eu quero dizer muito obrigado a todos vocês.